All right. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about UNICEF's experience in South Asia in integrating an equity perspective in evaluation. And I'm going to talk very much about the experiences of different country offices in conducting their own evaluations. So it's, in a sense, a very kind of hands-on, practical reflection on our efforts in this regard. I'm going to start off by quoting Tony Lake, the executive director of UNICEF, who says the equity approach is not just right in principle, it's right in practice. And I think we are seeing an increasing body of evidence, in a sense, demonstrating the effectiveness, the relevance of an equity-focused approach. But just focusing briefly on it being right in principle, I want to highlight that the equity approach is very much underpinned, let's say, by the human rights-based approach. It is in a way grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CEDAW, conventions relating to disability, to racial discrimination, and so on. And at the same time, gender equality also is really integral to the equity approach. So since our subject here is, of course, very much human rights and equity, I wanted to highlight that in a way the equity, I mean human rights and gender equality, that the equity approach really encompasses very much these two concepts. I had hoped to talk a little bit more about UNICEF's interpretation, in a sense, of equity and how it defines equity, but I think in the interest of time, we can't really go into that. Just to highlight that, obviously, in looking at equity, what we're doing is looking at determinants of inequity, in a sense, of disparities. We're looking at issues like income, we're looking at issues like geography, we're looking at issues like race and language, ethnicity, disability, of course, and gender. So what UNICEF does is in programming, first and foremost, it is trying to, or it sets out to integrate equity in its in all of its activities. And there's in the inset here, there is guidance, let's say, on how to program or how to integrate an equity focus in programming. And in the same way, we also have guidance on how to integrate an equity perspective in evaluation. In fact, Marco, I think, was very much played a lead role in developing this particular guidance. In particular, in addition, there are a range of additional publications that UNICEF has developed here in partnership with, in fact, many of the agencies that are represented here, looking at evaluation for equitable development results. So, what an equity-focused evaluation essentially is, you know, going back to basics, essentially is an assessment made of the relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact, sustainability of interventions on equitable development results. And it aims to support the empowerment of worst-off groups. So it has a kind of specific agenda, on the one hand, to analyze disparities, to analyze the worst-off groups, and to assess the extent to which programs have reduced inequities, or in some cases, possibly even increased inequities. And it has an explicit agenda also to develop recommendations on how to, in future, narrow equity gaps. In conducting evaluations with an equity focus, of course, we have the UNICEF evaluation policy as a broader guiding document. Some of you were in the presentation yesterday where I talked about the regional strategy that we developed to operationalize the policy, which also provides within the region a framework for us. We have this guidance on how to develop and design equity-focused evaluations. Obviously, the new UNEG norms and standards, the guidance that we were hearing about just now about human rights, integrating human rights and gender equality in evaluation. So all of this kind of comes together to provide a backdrop to our conduct of evaluations. Let me just grab my glass.
Too many challenges, you cannot even read them.
I really feel tethered here. All right, so I'm going to actually focus primarily on challenges at this stage, which doesn't mean that we haven't experienced quite a lot of successes as well along the way, and quite a lot of haven't had quite a lot of positive experiences. I'm going to touch upon them a little bit, but for the sake of this presentation, I'm really going to be focusing primarily on challenges, and many of these challenges are in fact very much related to day-to-day challenges in conducting any kind of evaluation, and to in a sense a lack of capacity in understanding evaluation design, evaluation processes, not to mention then also the perhaps added dimension or the additional dimension and ambition of integrating an equity perspective. So we're seeing capacity challenges, deficiencies, so to speak, across the board. A very important issue that we've come across in trying to conduct equity-focused evaluation is the evaluability. We heard a little bit about that earlier on, the evaluability of the initiatives. And what we find very often is that equity hasn't really been integrated very much in the program design, and an evaluation perspective, in a sense, has not really been integrated in program design, not to mention an equity perspective as well for evaluation. So obviously when we come around to actually conducting an evaluation, perhaps later on in the process, we find that there are missing baselines, that we don't have disaggregated data looking at all the different dimensions of inequity and so on. Then in terms of our quality assurance processes, in the use of reference groups, we often find that the individuals we have on these reference groups don't have much of a sense of our equity ambition, the equity focus, the different considerations that we would want to take into account. And in the same way, often the evaluators even that we can access within the region or that we can afford, let's say, to bring in, don't have a strong understanding of an equity analysis and how to integrate that into evaluation. Maybe just to highlight a couple of other points. Equity-focused evaluation relies very much on participatory processes, and in particular on defining together with stakeholders up front what the key questions are, what it is we really want to get out of these evaluations in order to address inequities at different levels. And what we're finding is that evaluations are not budgeting for time, both upfront or later on in the review processes. I was talking yesterday about the system we put in place to conduct external reviews of all of our terms of reference, inception reports, and draft reports. And here again, we have a quality frame that certainly addresses equity-related issues, but often the assessors, even though they pick up on issues of gender equality, human rights, and different dimensions of inequity, tend to be somewhat relaxed about this. I mean, in a sense, it's they're looking for the extent to which in the proposals we pay lip service to these issues rather than the extent to which we can really fundamentally address them. I'm not saying this is the case across the board, but the challenge there is certainly to bring in more rigor into this analysis. Just to skip on through, my sense is that what is working, or where the system is working, or the extent to which it is actually strengthening, is in part a function of the global rating system. Again, those of you who heard me yesterday, I talked about UNICEF's global rating system of evaluations, which also actually prioritizes equity very much. And so based on this rating system, eventually it can become quite clear across the board and across certainly to other stakeholders how much equity has been addressed in the context of an evaluation. This is reflected in a good rating or in a poor rating. And okay, thanks. And and so it certainly provides an incentive, in a sense, for country offices to pay attention to these issues. Another important factor, I think, is an increasing sensitization also on the planning side, in the context of the PME sections, of paying more attention to the equity dimension in planning in general, as well as in planning for evaluations. In looking forward, yeah, I think one of the key points is really ensuring the availability of the equity dimension in programming. I mean, it's difficult enough, I think, to ensure the availability of our programs in general. We have some challenges in that regard. So then incorporating the equity dimension is an additional challenge. Coming back to the issue of guidance, I think, guidance is fine. We have a lot of good guidance out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of space also to improve it. But at the end of the day, it's all about practice. It's all about, in a sense, from my perspective as a regional advisor, also hand-holding, I mean, working closely with the country offices in trying to get more practical experience in how to actually go about all of this. So, I mean, having guidance is fine, but applying it and making sure that it works on a day-to-day basis is the biggest challenge. In this regard, I'm pointing to a whole range of areas where capacity can be strengthened, where there are many opportunities to build capacity across the range from the enabling environment through to institutional level within the country offices, and of course at the individual level, not only within the country offices, but also together with partners. And in that regard, strengthening the accountability system, in a sense, across the whole range of these three different dimensions would be very important, and I'll leave it at that.